The moment Jaewon Kang walked into the coffee shop on Fifth Avenue, his entire world tilted on its axis. It hit him like a freight train, like lightning splitting through a summer sky, like every single cell in his body suddenly woke up after sleeping for 32 years. Jasmine, vanilla, something warm and sweet and utterly devastating. And underneath it all, the one thing he'd spent his entire life dreading, the scent of his fated mate. Jaewon froze in the doorway, his hand still on the glass door, his pulse hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. His wolf surged forward, desperate, hungry, clawing at his control with a violence that terrified him. No. The word rang through his mind like a gunshot. No, no, no. Because Jaewon Kang, Alpha King of the Soul Shadow Pack, the most powerful werewolf in all of Korea, had made himself a promise years ago. He would never, ever take a human mate. And yet here he was, standing in a Manhattan coffee shop at 8 in the morning, frozen like a fool, because somewhere in this room was the one person the moon goddess had decided to bind him to for eternity. And she was human. He could tell by the scent, pure, unmarked by any pack, untouched by the magic that ran through werewolf blood. His worst nightmare had just walked into his life in the form of Jasmine and Vanilla. 3 days earlier, Kiana Mitchell had been having a perfectly normal Tuesday. Well, as normal as any Tuesday could be when she was juggling 2 jobs, a mountain of student loans, and an apartment in Brooklyn that cost more than her entire childhood home back in Atlanta. Kiana stood behind the counter of Beans and Dreams, the specialty coffee shop where she worked mornings before heading to her graphic design gig in the afternoons. She was wiping down the espresso machine, humming along to the jazz music playing overhead, when her coworker Destiny leaned over with that look on her face. The look that meant she was about to say something Kiana absolutely did not want to hear. "Girl, when was the last time you went on a date?" Destiny asked, twirling one of her box braids around her finger. Kiana didn't even look up. "Define date." "You know, that thing where you put on something besides leggings, meet a man who's not your cousin, and have a conversation that doesn't involve coffee orders." Kiana snorted, "Pass." "Kai, I'm serious. You're 28, you're gorgeous, you're smart, and you spend every single weekend reorganizing your bookshelf and watching those weird Korean dramas." "They're not weird, they're art," Kiana shot back, finally meeting Destiny's eyes. "And for your information, I reorganized my bookshelf last month. Last weekend I reorganized my spice cabinet." Destiny stared at her. "That's worse, that's so much worse." Kiana laughed despite herself. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but I'm good. I've got my routines, my goals, my 5-year plan." "Your 5-year plan doesn't include human connection." "It includes selective human connection with people who don't waste my time." Destiny opened her mouth to respond, but the bell above the door chimed, and a customer walked in. Kiana glanced up, ready with her customer service smile, and nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. It was just another customer, a woman in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, ordering an oat milk latte with an extra shot. Kiana made the drink, handed it over, and went back to her conversation with Destiny, who was still giving her that look. "One date," Destiny pressed. "My cousin Terrell has this friend." "Absolutely not. You didn't even let me finish. Any sentence that starts with 'my cousin has this friend' ends in disaster. It's science." Destiny threw her hands up in surrender, laughing. "Fine. Die alone with your alphabetized spice cabinet." "It's organized by cuisine type, actually," Kiana corrected with a grin. The rest of her shift passed in the usual rhythm. Orders, steam, coffee, small talk. Kiana had worked at Beans and Dreams for 3 years, and she liked the predictability of it, the routine, the control. Control was important to Kiana. Growing up, she'd had very little of it. Her father had left when she was 6. Her mother had worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Kiana had learned early that if she wanted something in life, she had to plan for it, work for it, and never, ever leave anything to chance. That's why she had her 5-year plan. That's why she worked 2 jobs. That's why she didn't waste time on men who didn't have their lives together. She dated here and there. Nothing serious. Nothing that made her want to rearrange her carefully structured life. And she was fine with that. Totally fine. So why did she feel so restless lately? Kiana pushed the thought away as she untied her apron at the end of her shift. She said goodbye to destiny, grabbed her bag, and headed out into the November cold. She had exactly 45 minutes to get to her design job in Midtown, just enough time if she caught the express train. Kiana put in her earbuds, pulled up her favorite K-drama OST playlist, and disappeared into the crowded subway station, completely unaware that her entire life was about to change. Jaewon Kang didn't want to be in New York. He didn't want to be in America at all, actually. But when the Council of Alphas called an emergency summit, you showed up, even if you were an ocean away, even if you had a pack to run and responsibilities that didn't pause just because a bunch of old wolves wanted to argue about territory disputes. Jaewon sat in the back of the black SUV, his assistant and beta, Minjun, scrolling through emails on his tablet beside him. "The meeting's at 10, Minjun said in Korean, not looking up. "We have the representatives from the Vancouver pack, the Mexico City pack, and apparently the Seattle pack decided to show up uninvited." Jaewon made a noncommittal sound. He was staring out the window at the Manhattan skyline, his jaw tight. He hated these summits, hated the politics, hated the posturing. But most of all, he hated being away from home. Seoul was where he belonged, where his pack was, where his responsibilities were. Jaewon had become Alpha King at 25 when his father passed unexpectedly. 7 years later, he'd built the Seoul Shadow Pack into the most respected pack in Asia. He was fair but firm, strategic, untouchable, and utterly alone. Oh, he had his pack, his beta, his friends, but there was a specific kind of loneliness that came with being an Alpha King, and Jaewon had made peace with it years ago. He'd also made peace with the fact that he would never take a mate. Other wolves dreamed of finding their fated mate, the one person the moon goddess designed specifically for them. But Jaewon had seen too many alphas brought to their knees by the mate bond, had seen strong leaders become weak, distracted, vulnerable. And he'd seen what happened when an alpha took a human mate. Rejection from the pack, weakness in the bloodline, mates who couldn't understand their world, who couldn't survive it. His own grandmother had been human, and though his grandfather had loved her fiercely, the pack had never fully accepted her. She died young, fragile, unable to withstand the dangers that came with being connected to their world. Jaewon had watched his grandfather fall apart after her death. He'd promised himself he'd never let that happen to him. If the moon goddess ever gave him a mate, he'd simply reject the bond. It was rare, but it could be done. Painful, but possible. He'd rather be alone than weak. "We have an hour before the meeting," Minjun said, finally looking up. "Want to grab coffee? There's a place nearby that supposedly has decent espresso." Jaewon glanced at his watch. "Fine, but make it quick." That's how he ended up walking into beans and dreams at 8 in the morning on a Friday. That's how his entire life changed. The scent hit him the moment he crossed the threshold. Jaewon's wolf roared to life, and it took every ounce of control he had not to shift right there in the middle of the coffee shop. "Mate." The word echoed through every fiber of his being. "Mate, mate, mate." Hyung Minjun's voice sounded distant, concerned. "You okay?" Jaewon couldn't speak. His eyes scanned the coffee shop with predatory focus, searching, hunting. There, behind the counter, A woman with deep brown skin and her hair pulled back in a low bun. She was writing something on a cup, her head tilted slightly, completely unaware that she just turned his world upside down. She was beautiful, devastating, and absolutely undeniably human. No. Jaewon turned on his heel and walked straight back out of the coffee shop. Hyung Minjin followed him, confused. What? Get back to the car, Jaewon ordered, his voice rough. He was already walking fast, putting distance between himself and that scent. Did something happen? Was there a threat? Jaewon let out a laugh that sounded more like a growl. You could say that. Kiana felt it the moment he walked in. A pull, a shift in the air. Like every nerve ending in her body suddenly woke up and turned toward the door. She looked up from the cup she was writing on, and he was already gone. Kiana blinked, frowned. Weird. She could have sworn someone had just walked in. The door had opened, the bell had chimed, and then... You good? Destiny asked. Yeah, Kiana said slowly. Yeah, I'm fine. But for the rest of her shift, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had just happened. Something important. If you're already hooked and wondering what happens next, hit that like button and subscribe, because things are about to get wild. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when these two meet face to face. Jaewon lasted exactly 6 hours before his control started to crack. He sat through the summit meeting, listened to the arguments about territory and resources, mediated disputes, played his role. But the entire time, his wolf was going insane. Go back, find her, claim her. The urges were primal, overwhelming, and growing stronger by the minute. This was why fated mates were so dangerous. The bond didn't care about logic or plans or promises. It just wanted. By the time the meeting ended, Jaewon felt like he was crawling out of his own skin. You look terrible, Minjin observed as they left the conference room. I'm fine. You're not fine, you've been on edge all day. What happened at the coffee shop? Jaewon was quiet for a long moment. Then finally he said, I found my fated mate. Minjin stopped walking. What? In the coffee shop, this morning I scented her. That's Hyung, that's amazing. Why do you look like someone died? Because she's human. Understanding dawned on Minjin's face. Oh. Exactly. They stood in silence in the hotel hallway, the weight of it settling between them. Finally, Minjin spoke. So what are you going to do? Jaewon's jaw tightened. Nothing. I'm going to finish this summit and then I'm going back to Seoul. The bond will fade eventually if it's not acknowledged. Hyung, that's not. You can't just ignore a fated mate bond. Watch me. But even as Jaewon said the words, he knew it was a lie. Because he could still smell her. Jasmine and vanilla. Even miles away, even hours later, her scent was burned into his memory. And his wolf wanted her with a hunger that terrified him. Kiana's Friday night looked exactly like every other Friday night. She changed into comfortable clothes. Okay, yes, leggings, destiny, ordered Thai food, and settled onto her couch with her laptop to work on a design project. But she couldn't focus. That weird feeling from the coffee shop kept nagging at her, like she'd forgotten something important, like she'd missed something. Kiana shook her head, annoyed with herself. She was being ridiculous. She pulled up her favorite K-drama instead, the one she'd been binging for the past week. It was a supernatural romance about a Gyumiho, a Korean nine-tailed fox who fell in love with a human woman. Kiana had always loved stories like this. The impossible romances, the magic, the idea that fate could bring two people together despite impossible odds. Real life didn't work that way, of course. But it was nice to imagine. She was 3 episodes deep when her phone buzzed. A text from Destiny. Destiny, Terrell's friend is actually cute. I'm sending you his Instagram. Kiana *, no. Destiny asterisk too late, already sent. His name is Andre, he's a teacher, has a dog, owns property. Kiana clicked on the Instagram link despite herself. Andre was cute. Destiny wasn't wrong, nice smile, seemed normal. But when Kiana looked at his photos, she felt nothing. No spark, no interest, no pull. Just like every other guy she'd ever gone on a date with. Kiana sighed and tossed her phone aside. Maybe Destiny was right. Maybe there was something wrong with her. Maybe her standards were too high, or maybe she was too picky, or maybe. The feeling hit her again. That pull, that sense of something missing. Kiana stood up, restless, and walked to her window. She looked out at the Brooklyn street below, at the lights and the people and the endless movement of the city. And somewhere deep in her chest, something ached. Jaewon made it until midnight before he broke. He told himself he was just going for a walk, just needed to clear his head. But his feet carried him back to Fifth Avenue, back to the coffee shop. It was closed, of course, dark and empty. But her scent still lingered. Jaewon stood outside like a stalker, his hands shoved in his coat pockets, his wolf practically purring at the proximity to anything that smelled like her. This was insane. He was an alpha king. He had control, discipline. And yet here he was, standing outside a closed coffee shop in a foreign city, because his wolf needed to be near her scent. Pathetic, he muttered to himself in Korean. Talking to yourself, that's not a good sign. Jaewon spun around. And there she was. His fated mate, standing 3 feet away, wearing a puffy jacket and carrying a tote bag, looking at him with curious dark eyes. Up close she was even more beautiful, and her scent, God, her scent was everywhere, drowning him, destroying him. Sorry, she said with a small smile. Didn't mean to startle you, you looked kind of lost. Are you okay? Jaewon couldn't speak. His wolf was going absolutely feral, screaming at him to move closer, to touch her, to claim her. He forced himself to take a breath, to find his voice. I'm fine, he managed in English, though his accent was thick. Just walking. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. At midnight, outside a closed coffee shop. There was no judgment in her voice, just gentle amusement. And Jaewon realized, with a sinking feeling in his stomach, that he was absolutely doomed. Because now that he was standing in front of her, now that he could see her face and hear her voice and feel the bond pulling him toward her like gravity, he knew he'd never be able to walk away. Kiana had no idea what possessed her to talk to the stranger outside the coffee shop. She'd been on her way home from a late-night art supply run when she saw him standing there, staring at beans and dreams like it held the secrets of the universe. And something in her chest had just tugged. The same feeling from this morning, that pull. So she'd stopped, spoken to him. And now she was standing in front of possibly the most beautiful man she'd ever seen in her life, and her brain had apparently forgotten how to function. He was tall, Korean, she thought, based on his features, dressed in an expensive-looking black coat, and he was looking at her like she was something rare and fragile and utterly terrifying. I'm Kiana, she said, because the silence was stretching and someone had to say something. He hesitated, then Jaewon. His voice was deep, rough. It did things to her pulse that were absolutely inappropriate for a midnight conversation with a stranger. Nice to meet you, Jaewon, Kiana said. Then, because she was apparently feeling bold tonight, she added, you know, if you're looking for good coffee at midnight, there's a 24-hour place 2 blocks that way. She pointed west, and Jaewon's eyes followed her hand before coming back to her face. I wasn't looking for coffee, he said quietly. No, then what were you looking for? The question hung between them. Jaewon's jaw tightened. He looked like he was fighting some kind of internal battle. Finally he said, I don't know. It was such an honest answer that Kiana found herself smiling. Well, that makes two of us, she said. I've been feeling weird all day, like I forgot something important but I can't figure out what. Something flickered in Yiwon's eyes, something intense and searching. You felt it too, he said. It wasn't a question. Kiana's heart skipped. Felt what? But before Yiwon could answer, a car pulled up to the curb. A black SUV with tinted windows. A man stepped out, also Korean, younger than Yiwon but dressed similarly in all black. He spoke rapidly in Korean, and though Kiana couldn't understand the words, she caught the urgency in his tone. Yiwon responded in Korean, his voice sharp. The younger man glanced at Kiana, then back at Yiwon, and said something else that made Yiwon's expression darken. I have to go, Yiwon said abruptly, turning back to Kiana. Oh, okay. He started toward the car, then stopped, turned back. The feeling you mentioned, he said, the one you've had all day. Yeah. Don't ignore it. And then he was gone, disappearing into the SUV, leaving Kiana standing on the sidewalk with more questions than answers. Are you out of your mind? Minjun's voice filled the back of the SUV, frantic and disbelieving. You can't just approach your fated mate in the middle of the street like that. What if you'd lost control? What if you're wolf? I had control, Yiwon interrupted, though his hands were shaking. You had luck, Minjun corrected. Hyung, this is serious. If she's your fated mate, the bond is only going to get stronger, especially now that you've been in proximity to her twice in one day. Yiwon knew Minjun was right. He could already feel it. The bond had intensified the moment he'd seen her face, heard her voice. And when she'd smiled at him, when she'd said his name. His wolf had nearly taken over. We're leaving, Yiwon said firmly. First flight back to Seoul tomorrow. Running isn't going to break a fated mate bond. Maybe not, but distance will make it manageable. Minjun looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. He pulled out his phone and started searching for flights. Yiwon leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. He could still smell her, jasmine and vanilla. It was everywhere now, soaked into his clothes, his skin, his memory. Kiana. Even her name was perfect. Damn it, he whispered. Kiana couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with Yiwon over and over in her mind. Don't ignore it. Ignore what? The feeling, the pull. And what was that moment they'd shared? That weird, electric recognition. Kiana had dated enough to know what attraction felt like. This wasn't that. This was something else, something deeper, something that felt ancient and inevitable and completely insane. You're losing it, she muttered to herself. But when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of dark eyes and a voice that sounded like thunder. Yiwon didn't sleep at all. He spent the entire night in his hotel room, packing, trying to meditate, trying to push the bond down. Nothing worked. By the time dawn broke, he'd made a decision. He was going to see her one more time, not to talk to her, not to engage. Just to see her, to prove to himself that she was just a woman, nothing special, and his wolf was overreacting. It was a terrible plan. Minjun told him as much. But at 7:30 in the morning, Yiwon walked back into Beans and Dreams. And there she was. Kiana stood behind the counter, laughing at something her coworker said. She was wearing a simple black shirt and jeans, her hair in the same low bun as yesterday. She looked up as he entered, and their eyes met. The bond slammed into him like a physical force. Kiana's smile faltered. Her hand froze mid-wipe of the counter. Yiwon watched her pupils dilate, watched her breath catch. She felt it too, he was sure of it now. Slowly, Kiana set down the cloth and walked to the register. Yiwon, she said softly. Hearing his name and her voice did something dangerous to his control. Kiana. Her coworker, the one with the braids, was staring at them with undisguised curiosity. "What can I get you?" Kiana asked, and there was something cautious in her tone, like she was aware that something strange was happening but didn't know what. "Americano, black." She nodded and turned to make the drink. Jaewon watched her move, his wolf content just to be near her. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through him, so strong that his wolf surged forward. And for one terrifying second, Jaewon felt his eyes flash gold. He pulled back quickly, but not before Kiana gasped. "Your eyes." "I have to go," Jaewon said roughly. He dropped a $20 bill on the counter and walked out, his heart hammering. That was too close. Way too close. Okay, what the hell was that? Destiny appeared at Kiana's side the moment the door closed behind Jaewon. Kiana was staring at her hand, the one that had touched his. Her skin was still tingling. "Did you see his eyes?" Kiana whispered. "See what?" "The fact that he's gorgeous and was looking at you like you're the only person in the universe." "Yeah, I saw that." "No, I mean," Kiana shook her head, "never mind." But she couldn't shake what she'd seen. For just a split second when their hands touched, his eyes had. Number eyes didn't do that, didn't change color, didn't flash gold. She was seeing things. "Kai, seriously, who is that man, and why does he keep showing up?" "I don't know," Kiana admitted. "I met him last night outside the shop. And nothing. We talked for like 2 minutes and then he left." Destiny's eyes went wide. "Girl, that man is interested, like seriously interested. You need to get his number." "I don't even know him." "So that's what dating is for, getting to know people." But Kiana barely heard her. She was still staring at the door, at the space where Jaewon had been standing. Something was happening, something she didn't understand. And despite every logical bone in her body telling her to let it go, to move on, to stick to her 5-year plan, she wanted to know what it was. Jaewon made it back to the hotel. He made it into the elevator. He even made it to his room. But the moment the door closed behind him, he lost control. His wolf took over and Jaewon shifted. It was painful, the shift. More painful than usual because his wolf was furious at being denied his mate. Jaewon's wolf was massive, larger than any other wolf in his pack, with midnight black fur and those telltale gold eyes. He paced the hotel room, growling, desperate to go back to her. It took Minjun nearly an hour to talk him down, to help him shift back. "This is getting worse," Minjun said quietly as Jaewon collapsed on the bed, exhausted. "Hyung, you can't keep doing this. The bond is too strong." "I'm leaving today," Jaewon said. "The flight's at 3. "And you think distance is going to fix this?" Jaewon didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Smash that subscribe button right now because what happens next is going to blow your mind. The bond is only getting stronger and trust me, Jaewon's wolf isn't going to stay quiet for long. Kiana tried to focus on work. She really did. But after her shift at the coffee shop, she headed to her design job and spent the entire day distracted, unfocused, useless. Her boss, Lamar, eventually pulled her aside. "You good, Kai? You seem off today." "I'm fine," Kiana lied, "just tired." But she wasn't tired. She was restless, aching, like every cell in her body was pulling her toward something or someone. This was ridiculous. She'd met Jaewon twice, barely spoken to him, she didn't know anything about him. So why did it feel like something vital was missing? By the time she got home that evening, Kiana had convinced herself she was coming down with something. The flu, maybe. That would explain the weird physical symptoms. She made tea, put on her comfort K-drama and tried to relax. But halfway through the episode, her chest started to hurt. Not a sharp pain, more like an ache, like something was being pulled away from her. Kiana pressed her hand to her sternum, confused. And then suddenly, the pain intensified. She gasped, doubling over on the couch. What the hell? It lasted maybe 30 seconds, and then it faded, leaving her breathless and shaking. Kiana sat there, her heart racing, trying to make sense of what just happened. And somewhere, in a part of her mind she didn't quite understand, she knew. Jaewon was leaving. Jaewon sat in the airport terminal, his boarding pass in hand, staring blankly at the departure board. His chest hurt. The Bond was screaming at him, furious, demanding he turn around, go back, find her. Boarding starts in 20 minutes, Minjun said quietly beside him. Jaewon nodded. 20 minutes, and then he'd be on a plane back to Seoul, back to his life, back to control. He could do this. He had to. But then he felt it, a spike of pain through the Bond, not his pain. Hers. Kiana was hurting. Jaewon was on his feet before he could think. Hyung. She's in pain, Jaewon said roughly. The Bond. I know it's the Bond, Jaewon's control was fraying. I can feel it, she's damn it. He started walking, away from the gate, toward the exit. Where are you going? Minjun called after him. Jaewon didn't answer. He didn't have one. All he knew was that Kiana was hurting, and every instinct he had was screaming at him to go to her. The Bond had won. Kiana was still sitting on her couch, trying to calm her racing heart, when someone knocked on her apartment door. She frowned, she wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, she looked through the peephole. And her breath caught. Jaewon stood in her hallway, looking like he'd run the entire way. His hair was disheveled, his coat askew. Kiana opened the door. How did you? She started. Are you okay? Jaewon interrupted, his eyes scanning her face desperately. I felt you were in pain. Kiana stared at him. You felt it. Are you hurt? He stepped closer, and Kiana caught that scent again. Something woodsy and clean and utterly masculine. I'm fine, it was just, I don't know what it was. It lasted a few seconds and then stopped. Jaewon closed his eyes, and Kiana watched his shoulders sag with relief. You still haven't answered my question, Kiana said softly. How did you know where I live? Jaewon opened his eyes, and there was something raw and vulnerable in them. I need to tell you something, he said, and you're not going to believe me. Kiana's pulse kicked up. Try me. Jaewon took a breath. I'm a werewolf, an alpha, and you, Kiana, you're my fated mate. The words hung in the air between them. Kiana waited for the punchline, for him to laugh and say he was kidding. But he just stood there, watching her with those intense dark eyes. You're serious, Kiana said slowly. I'm serious. Kiana should have laughed, should have slammed the door in his face, should have called the police. But instead she heard herself say, Come in. I think you'd better explain. Kiana had watched enough supernatural K-dramas to know how this was supposed to go. The impossibly handsome, mysterious man reveals he's not human. The ordinary woman freaks out. There's running, screaming, denial. But as she sat across from Jaewon in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, listening to him explain werewolves and packs and fated mates, Kiana felt strangely calm. Maybe it was shock, maybe she'd fully lost her mind. Or maybe, deep down, some part of her had known all along that the pull she'd been feeling wasn't normal. So let me get this straight, Kiana said, cradling her now-cold cup of tea. Werewolves are real. You're the alpha king of a pack in Seoul, and I'm your, what did you call it? Fated mate, Jaewon said. He sat stiffly on her couch, looking deeply uncomfortable but determined. It's chosen by the moon goddess, one person meant specifically for you. Like soulmates. Stronger than that. It's a bond that ties two people together on a level that's spiritual, physical, and magical. Kiana processed this, and you didn't want this. It wasn't a question. She'd heard it in his voice when he'd first explained. The resistance, the fear. Yiwon met her eyes. No, I didn't. Because I'm human. Yes. At least he was honest. And now, Kiana asked, what happens now? I don't know, Yiwon admitted. I tried to leave. I was at the airport about to board a flight back to Seoul, but then I felt you through the bond, felt your pain, and I couldn't leave. Kiana's heart did something complicated in her chest. Show me, she said suddenly. Yiwon blinked. What? You said you're a werewolf, show me. Kiana, I don't think. If you want me to believe any of this, I need to see it. Yiwon was quiet for a long moment, then he stood. Not here, too small. I'll shift in your bedroom if that's okay. Kiana nodded and led him to her bedroom, her heart hammering. This was insane, completely insane. Yiwon stood in the center of her small room, and for a moment he just looked at her. It might scare you, he warned. I'll take my chances. He nodded, and then he began to shift. Kiana had expected something dramatic, painful-looking, like in the movies. But Yiwon's shift was fluid, natural. One moment he was a man and the next. A massive black wolf stood in her bedroom. Kiana's breath caught. The wolf was huge, bigger than any normal wolf had any right to be, with midnight black fur and eyes that glowed molten gold. Those eyes fixed on her, intelligent and aware. This wasn't just an animal, this was Yiwon. Slowly, carefully, Kiana stepped forward. The wolf Yiwon went very still. Kiana reached out and gently touched his head. His fur was impossibly soft. You're beautiful, she whispered. The wolf made a low sound, almost like a purr, and leaned into her touch. And Kiana felt it, the bond, like a golden thread connecting her heart to his. It was real. All of it. Yiwon shifted back, and Kiana politely turned around while he redressed. You can look, he said after a moment. She turned. He was fully clothed again, watching her warily. I believe you, Kiana said. Some of the tension left Yiwon's shoulders. You do. I mean, you just turned into a giant wolf in my bedroom, so yeah, I believe you. A hint of a smile tugged at his lips, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his whole face. So what now? Kiana asked. You go back to Korea and I go back to my normal life and we just ignore this bond thing. That was the plan. Was. Yiwon looked at her and there was something raw in his expression. I don't think I can ignore it anymore. The bond is too strong. And now that I've been near you, spoken to you, touched you, my wolf won't let you go. What about what you want? Kiana asked softly. Not your wolf, you. Yiwon was quiet for a long moment. I'm terrified, he finally admitted, of what this bond means, of what it will do to both of us. My grandmother was human, my grandfather's mate. The pack never fully accepted her, and when she died, it destroyed him. I swore I'd never let that happen to me. So you'd rather be alone? I'd rather be in control. Kiana understood that, maybe better than he knew. I get it, she said. Control, plans, not letting life surprise you. That's been my whole thing for years. She sat down on the edge of her bed, and after a moment, Yiwon sat beside her. But here's the thing, Kiana continued. I've spent my whole life planning, working, making sure I never ended up like my mom, struggling, powerless, and it's gotten me far. I have my jobs, my apartment, my 5-year plan. But, Yiwon prompted. But I'm lonely, Kiana admitted. I didn't want to need anyone. But that feeling I've had the past few days, that pull, it's the first time in years I've felt actually awake, like I've been sleepwalking through my own life. Their eyes met, and Kiana saw her own fear reflected back at her. So maybe we're both terrified, she said, and maybe this bond thing is crazy and impossible, but what if we just tried? Tried what? Getting to know each other. No pressure. No mating bond drama. Just two people seeing if there's something real here beyond magical destiny. Yiwon stared at her. You're serious? Why not? You're stuck in New York for a few more days, right? The summit. It ends tomorrow. So we have tomorrow. One day. Let's spend it together. You show me your world, I'll show you mine. And then you can go back to Seoul and we can figure out the rest from there. It was impulsive, completely against Kiana's usual careful nature. But something told her that if she let Yiwon walk away now, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. Yiwon was quiet, clearly warring with himself. Finally he said, "One day." Kiana smiled, "One day." They started the next morning at a Korean breakfast spot in Koreatown. Kiana had never had traditional Korean breakfast before, and she watched as Yiwon ordered for both of them in rapid Korean, completely in his element. When the food came, jjigae grilled fish, rice, banchan, Kiana stared at the spread. "This is breakfast." "This is breakfast," Yiwon confirmed, and there was amusement in his voice. They ate and Kiana asked him about Seoul, about his pack, about what it meant to be an alpha king. Yiwon answered carefully at first, but as the meal went on, he relaxed. He told her about his responsibilities, the politics, the weight of leadership. "It sounds lonely," Kiana observed. "It is," Yiwon admitted, "but it's what I was born to do. Doesn't mean you have to do it alone." Their eyes met across the table, and something warm unfurled in Kiana's chest. After breakfast, Kiana took him to the Brooklyn Museum, then to Prospect Park. She showed him her favorite bookstore, the coffee shop where she'd first started working, the bodega where the owner knew her order by heart. She told him about growing up in Atlanta, about her mom, about her dreams of running her own design firm someday. "You will," Yiwon said with certainty. "How do you know?" "Because you're stubborn, determined. When you want something, you make it happen." Kiana laughed. "You figured that out in one day." "I figured it out in 5 minutes." They spent the afternoon walking through the city, talking, laughing. And slowly the bond between them strengthened, not as some overwhelming magical force, but as something genuine, real. By the time the sun started to set, Kiana realized she didn't want the day to end. They ended up back at her apartment, and Kiana made spaghetti while Yiwon sat at her tiny kitchen counter, watching her move around the space. "This is nice," he said quietly. "What is?" "This, you being here." Kiana's heart squeezed. "Yeah, it is." They ate dinner, and then Kiana put on one of her favorite K-dramas. "You have to watch this one," she insisted. "It's about a goblin and a grim reaper." "I know Goblin," Yiwon said, amused. "It's Korean, we've all seen it." "Oh, right." They watched anyway, sitting close on the couch, and somewhere during the second episode, Yiwon's arm ended up around Kiana's shoulders. It felt natural, right? "I don't want to leave tomorrow," Yiwon said softly. Kiana looked up at him. "Then don't." "I have responsibilities, the pack. We'll still be there next week." Yiwon stared at her. "Are you asking me to stay?" "I'm asking you to choose," Kiana said. "Not because of the bond, not because your wolf is demanding it, but because you want to." "Okay, don't you dare click away now. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me Team Yiwon or Team Kiana, because the next part is going to have you in tears. I'm not kidding. Get your tissues ready." Yiwon didn't answer right away. He stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. Kiana waited, her heart in her throat. "My whole life," Yiwon finally said, "I've made decisions based on duty, on what was best for the pack. I became alpha at 25 when my father died. I gave up everything, friends, freedom, the chance at a normal life to lead." He turned to face her. "And I told myself I was happy, that it was enough. But then I met you, and for the first time in 7 years, I wanted something just for me." Kiana stood up, crossed to him. So take it, she said softly. It's not that simple. If I stay, if I pursue this bond, there will be consequences. The pack elders won't approve of a human mate. There could be challenges to my authority. And you, Kiana, you'll be in danger. There are enemies who would use you to get to me. I can handle myself. I know you can, but I'm not sure I can handle it if something happened to you. Kiana reached up and cupped his face with her hands. Jaewon, I spent my whole life playing it safe, planning everything, never taking risks, and I ended up lonely and restless and wondering if this was all there was. She took a breath. You scare me. This bond scares me. The idea of werewolves and packs and magical destiny scares the hell out of me. But the idea of going back to my safe, planned-out life without you in it, that scares me more. Jaewon's eyes searched hers. You mean that? I mean it. Even though I'm a werewolf, even though my world is dangerous. Even though. Jaewon closed his eyes, and Kiana watched him make the decision. When he opened them again, they were glowing gold. Then I'm staying, he said, for however long you'll have me. Kiana smiled, good. And then Jaewon kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid she'd break. But Kiana kissed him back, and the bond flared to life between them, golden and warm and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jaewon rested his forehead against hers. This is going to be complicated, he murmured. Probably. There will be challenges, from my pack, from my world. We'll face them. You're sure? Kiana pulled back to look him in the eyes. I'm sure. The next 2 weeks were the happiest of Kiana's life. Jaewon extended his stay in New York. He handled pack business remotely, had video calls with Minjun and the council elders. And he spent every spare moment with Kiana. They fell into a rhythm, breakfast together, walks through the city, evenings curled up on her couch, talking, laughing, learning each other. The bond grew stronger every day, but so did something else, something deeper than magic. Real love. Kiana found herself opening up in ways she never had before, telling Jaewon her fears, her dreams, her secrets. And Jaewon did the same. He told her about the pressure of leadership, about losing his father, about the loneliness of being an alpha king. You don't have to be lonely anymore, Kiana said one night, her head on his chest. I know, Jaewon murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair, because I have you. But their bubble of happiness couldn't last forever. 3 weeks after Jaewon had first walked into Beans and Dreams, reality crashed back in. Kiana was at work when it happened. She just finished a design presentation and was walking back to her desk when she felt it. A spike of fear through the bond, not her fear. Jaewon's. Her phone rang a second later, Minjun's number. Kiana, you need to get to the hotel, now. What happened is Jaewon. He's fine, but there's been a challenge. The pack elders found out about you. They're demanding he return to Seoul immediately, and if he refuses... If he refuses what? Minjun's voice was grim. They'll strip him of his title, exile him from the pack. Kiana's blood ran cold. I'm on my way. She grabbed her bag and ran. She found Jaewon in his hotel room, packing like a caged animal. The moment he saw her, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I'm so sorry, I should have known this would happen. Tell me what's going on. Jaewon pulled back, and Kiana saw the anguish in his eyes. The elders found out about our bond, about you. They're giving me an ultimatum. Return to Seoul immediately and reject the bond or forfeit my position as Alpha King. Can they do that? Technically, yes, if enough of the council votes against me. So we go to Seoul, Kiana said. We face them together. Kiana, you don't understand. If I bring you there, if I present you as my mate, there will be wolves who challenge me, who see you as a weakness. You could be hurt, or worse. I'm not afraid. Well, I am, Yiwon's voice broke. I'm terrified, because I've already lost you once when I tried to leave and I can't. I won't lose you to my world. Kiana cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. You're not going to lose me. We're in this together, remember. You and me against whatever comes. What if it costs me everything? The pack, my title, my home. Then we'll build a new home, together. Yiwon stared at her, and Kiana saw the moment he truly understood. She wasn't going anywhere. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, then we go to Seoul together. 2 days later, Kiana found herself on a plane to Korea. It was surreal. A month ago, her biggest concern had been making rent. Now she was flying across the world with a werewolf alpha king to face a pack of wolves who might want her dead. You can still change your mind, Yiwon said beside her, holding her hand. Not a chance. They landed in Seoul on a gray morning. Minjun picked them up, greeting Kiana with a respectful bow. The council is waiting, he said to Yiwon. Let them wait. Yiwon took Kiana to his home first, a stunning traditional Korean house in the hills outside the city. This is where you live, Kiana breathed, taking in the beautiful architecture. This is where we'll live, Yiwon corrected, if you want. Kiana turned to him. Are you asking me to move to Seoul? I'm asking you to be my mate, officially, in front of the pack, the council, the moon goddess herself. Kiana's heart stuttered. Yiwon. I know it's fast, I know it's insane, but Kiana, I love you, not because of the bond, not because fate chose you, but because you're stubborn and brave and you make me want to be more than just an alpha king. You make me want to be a man worthy of you. Tears pricked Kiana's eyes. I love you too. Then say yes, be my mate, face this with me. Kiana thought about her 5-year plan, her carefully constructed life in New York, her coffee shop job and her design work and her organized spice cabinet. And then she thought about Yiwon, about the way he made her feel alive, about the future they could build together. Yes, she said, yes, I'll be your mate. Yiwon kissed her, and the bond flared between them, sealing the promise. The council meeting was held that evening in a traditional hall. Kiana walked in beside Yiwon, her head high, refusing to show fear even though her heart was hammering. The council elders sat in a semicircle, 7 wolves, all older, all watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and hostility. You dare bring a human before this council? The eldest, a woman with silver hair, said in Korean. Yiwon responded in Korean, his voice strong and unwavering. Kiana didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. He was defending her, fighting for her. The argument went back and forth, voices rising. Finally, another elder, a man with kind eyes, spoke up. Let her speak, he said in English, looking at Kiana. If she is to be our alpha's mate, let her prove herself worthy. All eyes turned to Kiana. This was it, her moment. Kiana took a breath and stepped forward. I know I'm not what you expected, she said clearly. I'm human, I don't have wolf blood. I don't understand all your traditions, but I love Yiwon, and I'm willing to learn, to adapt, to prove myself to this pack. Love is not enough, the silver-haired elder said coldly. You are weak, fragile, you will make our alpha weak. Respectfully, I disagree, Kiana said, meeting the woman's eyes. Yiwon is the strongest man I've ever met, but strength doesn't mean being alone. It doesn't mean refusing help or connection. Real strength is choosing to be vulnerable, to love despite the risk. She turned to address the whole council. I can't offer you wolf blood or supernatural power, but I can offer loyalty, dedication, and the promise that I will stand beside Yiwon and support him in leading this pack, no matter what comes. The room was silent. Then the kind-eyed elder smiled. She has courage, he said. I vote to accept her. As do I, another elder said. One by one, the votes came in. When it was over, 5 had voted to accept Kiana. Only 2 had voted against. The silver-haired elder looked displeased, but she nodded stiffly. The council has spoken. The human may be recognized as the alpha's mate. Jaewon's hand found Kiana's, squeezing tight. They'd won. The official mating ceremony was held under the full moon. Kiana wore a traditional Korean hanbok in deep blue, and Jaewon wore formal black. The pack gathered in the hills, hundreds of wolves in both human and animal form. The pack shaman performed the ceremony, binding Kiana and Jaewon together with ancient words and moonlight. When it was done, Jaewon kissed her, and the pack howled their approval. Kiana felt the bond lock into place, permanent and unbreakable. She was officially Jaewon's mate, and she'd never been happier. 6 months later, Kiana stood in Jaewon's home, their home, putting the finishing touches on her design studio. She'd moved to Seoul 3 months ago, left her jobs in New York, packed up her carefully organized life and started over. It had been terrifying and difficult and absolutely worth it. She'd started her own design firm, working with clients both in Korea and internationally. She was learning Korean slowly, with Jaewon's patient help. And she'd found her place in the pack. It hadn't been easy. Some wolves still looked at her with suspicion, but others had welcomed her. And Kiana had proven herself time and again, showing up for pack events, learning their traditions, supporting Jaewon's leadership. She heard the door open and smiled as Jaewon's arms wrapped around her from behind. "How was the council meeting?" she asked. "Long, boring, I missed you." Kiana turned in his arms. "I missed you too." Jaewon kissed her softly, happy. "Incredibly. No regrets about leaving New York." Not even one. And it was true, because Kiana had learned something important over the past 6 months. Plans were good, control was good, but sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. Sometimes you had to take a leap of faith. Sometimes you had to choose love over fear. And sometimes the moon goddess knew exactly what she was doing when she chose your mate. The lesson: life doesn't always go according to plan, and that's okay. Sometimes the things that scare us most, the unexpected changes, the leaps of faith, the risks we never thought we'd take, are exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be. Real strength isn't about maintaining perfect control. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, to love despite the possibility of loss, to trust that even when life takes us in directions we never planned, we can handle it. And most importantly, you don't have to face life's challenges alone. The right person, the right partner make you weak. They make you stronger, braver, more capable of facing whatever comes. So don't be afraid to take chances on love, on change, on the beautiful, messy, unplanned moments that make life worth living. Because sometimes, the best stories are the ones we never saw coming. If this story touched your heart, made you believe in love, or just gave you all the feels, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to take chances on love. And drop a comment telling me, what's one leap of faith you'd take if you weren't afraid? Let's build a community of brave, love-believing dreamers right here. Thank you for watching Fantasy Tales by Queen Dora. Until the next story, let the moon guide you.